Scott here, guys. A very warm welcome for joining us on our third episode of this limited series. In our first episode, we discussed some of the fears and frustrations men face today. In episode 2, we really started to discuss what's the lowest necessary level for a decent life, what quality of life is, and how, for many globally, it's going down. And you've probably felt it too. And you met Joe from the Philippines, who's just been laid off from his call center career, replaced by AI. Catch up now if you haven't already. Paychecks and your social security just doesn't go as far, and something needs to be done before that trend continues. But before we discuss that in our next episode, we need to talk about something foundational and uncomfortable for some. How race has always shaped outcomes in America. Not because people want it to, but because history made it so. For Joes, people of color here and abroad, it's always been worse. Affirmative action and DEI programs weren't handouts. They were life rafts. And that's why you're here, guys, angry and pissed, because in our system of winners and losers, you lost, even if you never played the game. But first, to talk about why there was affirmative action and DEI handouts and what they were, we need to understand generational wealth. I study history, and as a lot of you know, it's a big theme in my videos, because it's important to look at the past, especially in relation to what it can tell us about the present. And remembering our place in history helps us to better understand the needs of future generations and the consequences of our actions and inactions. So, with my love of history, it will come as no surprise that I do a lot of genealogy. And genealogy is a great way not only to understand where you belong in our big family we call the human race and how we're all related, it also is a great way of illustrating generational wealth. Most people in life, and as far as we know, most humans throughout time have evolved and advanced as time went on, individually, societally, and generationally. A secret family recipe, or an inheritance, can have long-lasting impacts that can span centuries. Just look at the aristocracy of England. Some of my family have prospered since 1066, when they smashed the heads in of some Anglo-Saxon. Life isn't a sport, and it shouldn't be treated like one. And I came to a realization about my own family. I found some really impressive things on my family tree, like I'm related to Benjamin Franklin and Abraham Lincoln. I'm also related to Stonewall Jackson. So yes, my ancestors had slaves, and yes, based on the compounding effects of generational wealth, I may have unknowingly benefited from slavery. Think of it this way. If my family had slaves, they benefited from countless hours of unpaid labor, and because of that, they were able to save money. Now, here's where compounding interest comes in. And if you've ever read The Automatic Millionaire, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Compounding is basically money growing on top of money. Imagine you put $1 in the bank and it earns a little bit of interest. Next year, you don't just earn interest on the original dollar, you earn it on the dollar plus the interest. Then the year after that, you're earning interest on the new total. Over time, the growth snowballs. That's how regular people who follow advice in books like The Automatic Millionaire can slowly build wealth just by setting money aside consistently. Set it and forget it. I highly recommend the book, and I'll talk about that in a future video. But here's the thing. My ancestors didn't have to start from zero. They got that from everyone who's ever preceded them. And they got that head start because of unpaid labor. So their money started compounding generations before someone else even had a chance. So after years of passing down money, one family member at a time, it adds up. Even if no single person ended up wealthy, the advantage stacked. And even if my family doesn't have any generational wealth anymore, I don't know what happened to it, we still benefited in other ways compared to someone who might be a descendant of one of the slaves my family owned. For example, while my family in the American South had to rebuild after the war, at least most of the South had something to rebuild. Freed slaves didn't have anything. They didn't get reparations then. They never got their 40 acres and a mule. Imagine not getting paid weekly or bi-weekly or monthly, but once in your life, and then being told you're not going to get that either. While my family was able to get a decent education and get better jobs because our family was middle class, that descendant's family spent generations just trying to get out of the poverty that victims still fall into. Redlining, segregation, all of these things impacted years of subjugation, inequality, racism, and murder. So, for many African Americans, slavery had, and for many, still has a negative impact on their health and quality of life. Generational wealth loss by Jim Crow racism, segregation, and voter disenfranchisement. And then there was redlining, forcing many blacks into worse neighborhoods and limiting how much they could make in equity, further contrasting the difference between white and black and richer versus probably poorer. I probably went to better schools because my parents and their parents lived in better neighborhoods with better tax bases that could afford better teachers. I didn't face the stress of hatred and discrimination that many face because of race and ethnicity, and that stress or lack thereof can have a huge impact on quality of life and life expectancy. Do you remember how I mentioned that weathered episode in our last video? It also talks about how stress is a contributing factor in death in cyclones. I mention it because stress can be deadly, and it's something we need to face as individuals and as a society. And compounding stresses, like worrying about if you'll have money for rent or if that next storm or fire is going to take your house, is real. Aren't those things the government should be helping us with? Dealing with the stress, not making it worse. Imagine how bad it was for the son of a slave, nothing to inherit, having to forge a new life, probably in a new city, facing constant discrimination and hatred along the way. Many of you feel like we're in the same position for very different reasons. There had to be an answer to this generational compounding trauma, and that's where affirmative action and DEI programs came in, to give voice to those who were Americans that weren't really part of the American dream. If something wasn't done, the compounding effect of negative generational wealth would go on forever, increasing wealth disparities and incomes. And that's why you're here, guys, angered and pissed, because in our system of winners and losers, many of you lost out on the American dream. Some because of generational wealth stolen, others because society hasn't defined a place for them, even if you never played the game, and for many of you before you even started. Is life fair? It certainly hasn't been for generations of Americans who are now seeing those gains lost under cuts to DEI and affirmative action, but let me ask you, is any of your lives better after these cuts? Some people got ahead, got that place in school or job that you were never going to get. It's not that person's fault who applied for the job any more than your neighbor who applies for the same position as you. The system was so rigged for so long against so many, shifting the problem to another group of people isn't the answer anymore than denying the generational wealth for descendants of slaves, because that is exactly what will take place if a poor white family has to deal with that situation for decades or even centuries. Now, earlier I mentioned that racism is costly for the victim. It's also costly for the rest of society. Racism isn't only a moral failure, it's a balance sheet problem. When whole neighborhoods are redlined out of mortgages, you don't just block families from building equity, you shrink local tax bases, which weakens schools, which lowers lifetime earnings, which raises healthcare costs, which means fewer small businesses, fewer homeowners, more stress, more policing, more prisons, and less innovation. Everybody pays through higher emergency room use, higher insurance premiums, lost productivity, and the lost genius of people who never got a fair shot. Imagine two kids born the same year. One grows up near good transit, safe parks, and stable schools. The other grows up where buses are rare, food is processed, and schools bleed teachers. 20 years later, we act surprised that one has savings and one has medical debt. The price tag of racism shows up as slower growth, lower life expectancy, and budgets that forever fix emergencies instead of preventing them. A fairer system costs less because thriving is cheaper than triage. Something had to be done. We can make life more fair if we want to. Is life fair for you? Let's face it, unless you're rich and getting richer, you're only getting poorer, and life is unfair for most of us. Competition is fine for sports because that's what sports is. But life isn't sports. It's a thrill, a need for some. Avarice and compounding wealth, for others, homelessness and unanswered prayers. If it's a sport, should it be played out so that some people have crap lives while others thrive? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear from you. I heard an interview the other day of a celebrity who's been working for years, since childhood actually. The interviewer asked, what can they attribute to their success? And their answers were all personal. Their hard work, their growing as an artist. But the whole interview got me thinking. You probably are never interviewed and asked about your success. Did you put any less work into yours? And is propelling a child on to stardom the same opportunity as an actress or actress working their entire lives waiting tables for that one big chance at success that a child star was thrust into? Life was theirs to fail at. They were already on the path to success. We've been talking about what it takes to survive and all of the things that make life all that harder, and after generations it impacts by compounding these effects. But the reverse is also true. Unfair opportunities exist, whether it's someone getting a job that you didn't, or someone getting a gig in a commercial before they could sign their name. The world is inherently unfair and only getting worse. And it's that compounding effect that have even dire consequences for our children and our children's children. In our next episode, I'll discuss my solution for these issues and do my big reveal, because this is something we have to confront and face together. But before we go, I have to say something quick about hero worship, celebrity culture, and allowing the rich to make millions in the hopes that one day you'll join them. Let's put the compounding effect in perspective. According to a January 5th article by Finance Monthly, Elon Musk makes $631 every second of every minute of every hour of every day he breathes. That's $54,550,000 every day. You're never going to catch up. No one should be allowed to make in one day what some people don't make in a lifetime. It's not fair, and in our next episode, I'll tell you what we're going to do about it. But remember this: we have to change our feelings on wealth. We need to stop celebrity hero worship and stop loving reality shows on the lives of the rich and famous, because we shouldn't be dreaming what it's like to live like them. We should be living more like them. And yes, it's possible, but only if we work together.